Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu delivered his first address at the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly in the early hours of Wednesday. President Tinubu emphasized Africa's potential for prosperity, the importance of international investments in its development, and the need to combat climate change. Let's take a listen.
Permit me to say a few words on behalf of Nigeria, my country, on behalf of Africa, my continent, regarding this year's theme. Many proclamations have been made, yet our troubles remain close at hand. Failures in good governance have hindered Africa, but broken promises, unfair treatment, and outright exploitation from abroad have also exerted a heavy toll on our ability to progress. Given this long history, if this year's theme is to mean anything at all, it must mean something special and particular to Africa. We realize that underlying conditions and causes of economic challenges facing today's Africa are significantly different from those of post-war Europe. We are not asking for identical programs and actions. What we seek is an equal, firm commitment to partnership. We seek enhanced international cooperation with African nations to achieve the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals. If Nigeria is to fulfill its duty to its people, I know, and the rest of Africa, we must create jobs and the belief in a better future for our people. We are pushing for that. We must also lead by example, and we are doing so, to foster economic growth and investors' confidence in Nigeria, and remove the costly and corrupt fuel subsidy while also discarding a noxious exchange rate system in my first few days in office.
There you have it. Let's now bring in Joshua Akinbanjo, who is a socio-economic analyst and a sustainability commentator, to analyze this. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
All
Good
right.
morning, audience.
Good morning. Let's get into the conversation this morning. You've heard an excerpt of the speech given by the president. He's talked about some of the policies he made in the first few weeks in office, being, of course, that he removed fuel subsidy and unifying the exchange rate, and saying that these are some of the policies that have sort of, in some way, strengthened investor confidence. Do you share the same sentiments?
Well, I think I will start by saying that he spoke on 5 key points in the speech yesterday, and that indeed was a part of the first point that he made, which is the fact that, let me go straight to the very first point, which is the fact that he was encouraging investor confidence and speaking to the need for the global community to find it necessary to support the growth of Nigeria. And so what he then said there is to say, look, one of the key challenges that he sees is the need to remove the fuel subsidy and also the exchange rate alignment. And so that is just a point, a subset of point 1, which he spoke about. Has it been a favorable position he took? That's a different point entirely, because people are feeling the impact, the impact of his of that action that was taken. So I would say that yes, in terms of, is it a necessary thing to encourage FDIs, like foreign direct investment? Perhaps, when you look at the requirement. But is it favorable to Nigerians at this point in time? Not. We know it is not. And I pray that was why he made the other point about the fact that there are other measures that the government is taking to ensure that the effect is cushioned on Nigerians. So overall, I think there are 5 points, like I said, and I want to hope that the other points he made about the partnership, because he emphasized the bit around the Marshall Plan, that it appeared that the global community is still seeking to stand on the Marshall Plan, which only favored the Western world and not Africa. And at this point in time, they need to look at how do we move away from that old perception that Africa is like a place to be looted. And I think that is what I found very interesting, that he had the courage to even present this and to demand for partnership with the global community. That is significant. I hope that in the course of it, we'll talk about the other critical 4 points and see how that also impacts on the speech.
Most importantly, we'll take a look at the critical 4 points as we proceed in this conversation. But let's also look at the fact that prior to making this statement, I mean, this is his first being the president of Nigeria. Absolutely. I mean, addressing other presidents as well in the UN. There are calls, especially back home, that going out to seek for relevant partnerships and also going out to seek for relevant support from the Western community could prove to be detrimental if charity has not started from home. And by charity, we mean the refineries have not been fixed. Just a few minutes ago, we did have some economists who joined us and talked about extensively about power sector and the likes. And here we have the president. I mean, he's doing his best. Let's be honest. He's doing his best, trying to instill confidence in Nigeria once again. But what are your thoughts on building the blocks from home right before we call or invite the international community to come in? That's one question I'd like you to look at. And secondly, I'd like you to look at this from an economic perspective. Do we think that a collaboration at this point will benefit Nigerians who are indeed groaning on the recent situation that they are faced with?
Thank you for the questions. I think we need to look at what are those critical sustainability platforms that enables a country thrive. No country is an island. You need to thrive because you operate within a community of countries. Now, what level of investment have been encouraged from home? I recall the very second day this man came on the seat, a couple of meetings he had, I think with the chief of security staffs, went further to then have meetings with the governors. And by the third day or the fourth day, you then had local investors visiting him. I thought that he made a very strong point there. You had Mobile visited, you had Airtel visited, several other, local investors. And then you had the likes of Dangote and co also making the visit, and they had those pallies. So I thought from that point of view, let's give him credit that he actually started from home, okay? And if he started from that point, the next point was the idea of, coring foreign investment, which was what led to I think it was the last, is it G20 summit in India, where he then went ahead to, look for investors. Let's be mindful of the fact that you have a few of those investors already resident here, but there was a need then to attract their head offices to say, look, invest in this country. And I think that is one of the points we should not lose sight of as we talk about economic growth and about investment from local to global. And I think that is what he's done. Now, how has this impacted the country? How has this impacted us from whether it's power or whether it's road? But I like the point you made around refinery, and I think we should also interrogate that properly. Is it true that the Port Harcourt refinery is being fixed as we speak? Yes, or perhaps it's just a work in progress. We saw the videos, journalists presented that in a couple of TV stations. We saw these things online. And the promise was that by December, Port Harcourt refinery will be active. If it will be, that will be a fantastic result. But is it sufficient? Is my own concern. And so if we look at it from what he has said and what he did last night / this early morning, I want to believe that the right steps have been taken in the right direction. Okay, I mean, that's it. The refineries are on, the dam being fixed because of the issues with Cameroon, the light in terms of power being addressed aggressively. All of this point to the fact that we are heading in the right direction. Yes, the bigger pain is with the impact of the first decisions taken on the first day at the inauguration ground, which is saying removal of fuel subsidy. And I think that is where the real challenge is for Nigerians, because if the heat is high, but again, we know no woman rejoices until after delivery. Nobody is happy at the point of labor. And I think we're just in this labor phase, which is almost, I want to hope it will be over soon. I hope, and I hope, I'm not hoping against hope, that this is one of the things that will be addressed critically. With all the investor drives, he's turned himself to a salesman. So he's more or less the chief salesman of the country. How do you do that? You have to go ahead in terms of lobbying for countries to invest in your nation and making sure that those critical points are addressed. I hope that answered the question in terms of, all the initial shenanigans about investments from local before going global, and the impact of also making sure that local, industries are put in place, from refineries to power and oil.
All right. So now let's talk about democracy and his statements regarding democracy on the continent. I'm going to quote what he says. He says, "Second, we must affirm democratic governance as the best guarantor of the sovereign will and well-being of the people. Military coups are wrong, as is any titled civilian political arrangement that perpetuates injustice." He went further to say, "The wave crossing parts of Africa does not demonstrate favor towards coup. It's a demand for solutions to perennial problems," which is something that a number of people would agree with. He's also the chairman of ECOWAS and has restated his commitment to negotiating with the forces in Niger. He's extending a hand of friendship to all who genuinely support his mission. How would you access, this statement, his affirmation of democracy and democratic rule and the return to democracy, for example, in Niger? Whereas, how do we x-ray the statement on the backdrop of the criticism that has trailed his administration? It is being said that the quality of democracy being run in the country is not one that should be excited about, that we should be excited about, especially looking at more recently the quality of elections that we have run, the elections that brought the president into power. So how would you rate this statement, rate Nigeria's democracy, rate Africa's democracy, and the sincerity of his statement or the lack thereof?
We've had several opinions. People have shared and presented positions. And I say opinions because when some things are still cloudy, not fact-based, eventually you would ascribe to them as opinions. Now, let me speak first to the bit about coups and counter coups and the likes in Africa, which is the second point I think that he made, citing Niger. We shouldn't lose value of that address. It was a two-pronged thing. Basically, he owned on behalf of Africa that there is a failure on our part in terms of governance. That was the point he made. He then countered it with a second, or more like a two-edged sword. To say, while Africa may have failed, you guys at the global community, you have also been reckless in the way you have been involved in this. If you read that statement very well, that is actually what he was alluding to. That yes, we know that there are issues around governance in Africa, failed governance, issues around commitments by leadership, but you guys have also trampled in ways that have not been very forthright with Africa. And there's a need to now readdress that. While I, as ECOWAS chairman, am also talking with our people and trying to get it fixed, I think that is a point that was then made there. So while we speak about that, I think that we can put that in one pack. The other point that is key, which is a question asked about Nigeria specifically in terms of our democracy. I had opportunity of speaking at a forum just last week, and this was one of the conversation points. And the question that was raised was, look, who are we comparing with? We're about 60 years old, 63 this year, in another couple of days, versus countries that are 250 years old. What's the base of comparison? Currently, we have a country in the U. Let's just go straight to say US, where Biden is still having issues around: is it true? Is it not true? For Nigeria, the point will still be this: what is the base of our comparison? Has the election been, clean? We can't say yes. I mean, there's still so much rooms to be covered. There's still so much cleanups to be done. We still have a long way to go as a nation, but this is part of that democratic process. And I think that to that end, as long as the Constitution is respected, and the Constitution is the reason for which any nation exists, I won't say because I cited one other particular, candidate, then I should undermine the currency and the efficiency and efficacy of the currency. The nation is bigger than any other person. And so what we can only, and work towards is that as individuals, we must be ready to call out the situations and also ask the hard questions, so that those who are responsible for the necessary, from INEC to the police, to media, to every organs of government, is held accountable, so that we can have right governance. And I think that is what we need to work towards. But overall, going back to the speech, I think it was quite clear, succinct in terms of, look, Africa, we are not yet there, we are moving on, which is a comment being made, or if I may allude to that. The second part is, look, you guys have your role to play, because you've also impacted on how Africa has been moving on. And I think that is one way you can demand accountability and responsibility.
Well said. Thanks so much for highlighting those points, especially from the speech, taking those excerpts there and breaking them down. But some economists, especially some Pan-Africanists, are of the opinion that going to the UN, for instance, to discuss Africa's problem, does not in any way give Africa its results. That it would be better if Africa, or the African leaders, we're not talking about the African Union this time, but African leaders can decide to take their own problems and find solutions within themselves, or possibly try to meet with other African leaders and see how they could sort these things out. A clear chairperson, I like to put it that way, or one person who is championing this cause, has always said that is the Rwandan president. Talk about Rwandan president, I beg your pardon. Her name fills me right about now, but he's also been there. He's been pushing. You also have, yes, absolutely. And then you also have the Ugandan president as well, Museveni, who's also come out to talk tough and say, listen, this is what we're seeing. Let me pose this question to you here. Just a few months ago, Nigeria fell within the pecking order of countries that have actually gotten skilled workers. We also fell in the aspect of education. You had countries like Botswana, a few other countries who topped. And here we have the president, who's also calling for partnerships and others to come into the country yet again. I'm still going to go back to this, and that's why I'm asking you. How do we look forward to revive an economy, a system, the way of doing things, our political atmosphere, not forgetting to our own infrastructure, which still may not be able to hold what we are requesting for? Don't you think that aside from carrying out that speech, there should be a high level of action that's taking place here in Nigeria for all to see?
I'm tempted to ask around the action points, but let me...
I can break it down further.
Yes.
I mean, we have the Fourth Mainland Bridge. We've not seen anything.
Okay.
You've already touched on the refineries. We have the education system, which is in a state of comatose. I mean, you cannot compare when you went to school. You know what you really got compared to what the children are getting now. We have more private schools than we had government schools. Now, the government schools are nothing to talk about. We also have the judiciary, which many are talking about, especially you've seen the what's going on now, what the PPC had used in carrying out its verdict. It's quite different from what judiciary is also using in different states in calling out the verdict. So there's a lot of disorientation, a lot of things are being scattered. How can we action these solutions internally so that when we call for partnerships and others to come in, then we can start to see the benefits?
Thank you for that question. I think the clarity is also very important. Let's put the refinery aside. We've agreed that some work is going on there. Again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the government. I'm speaking as an analyst, reviewing the entirety of the nation with a dispassionate, view. In other words, we just want to speak to the objectivity. Now, I think next week we'll make it 4 months that he's been in governance. That's almost 120 days, if I'm not mistaken, which is the 4th month, like you said. In these 4 months, what I tried to do was to analyze all the policy trends, analyze some of the action points. It is, number one, to the credit of Nigeria that you have a president that resumed office and have not taken off, as we've had in the past, to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 1 month away in a foreign country being treated or undergoing medical attention. We've seen a president, for the first time in a long while, that is day-to-day working. And the work is not just theoretical, but it's also in terms of execution based. In other words, what are the practical things? We've seen the president, these are things that give me some sort of comfort. A president who is putting some right round pegs in round holes. And then if I put it that way.
Absolutely.
We've seen in terms of the individuals who are occupying certain specific sectors and certain specific roles. And this is basically saying, are the necessary economic indices being watched and viewed in terms of the parameters and then being plugged? And I think that is what we should start looking at. And what I was saying the particular forum also with the media, is to say, look, can we also have our guys ask some critical questions? Because to help us to get the right answers from this government. I think if you look at overall, we are going on the right direction for now. And I think we should just, let's stay hopeful, and also let's ask the questions. Let's also put pressure on this government so they can deliver, the commitments and the promises they have made to Nigerians.
And that's exactly what we're doing by having these conversations and having you join us. Thank you for your time with us and helping us analyzing this speech. And let's wish the best for Nigerians, because when good happens in Nigeria, all of us will benefit from it.
Exactly.
Thank you for your time
Exactly.
with us this morning.
Exactly.